All right. Hi, everybody. Steve Muldrow here with the Wrestling Lab. I'm at the brand new BA facility in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm joined by Carolyn Wester, head wrestling coach at American Kickboxing Academy. Carolyn, thank you for joining. I was at the the second session earlier
Yes, sir.
today, and I have to say, really cool stuff. I've never seen anything quite like it. So I was just wondering, could you give me a little bit of um, a description of your style of coaching?
Sure. And let me just be clear. I'm the head coach at Wrestling Prep, but I'm one of the wrestling coaches at AKA. So I do chief corner for AKA on the fighters that I work with, but I want to be very careful because we all at AKA are there under the guidance of Javier Mendez. And I would never want to be the slightest bit, misrepresenting that. But anyway, my style of coaching and my style of wrestling is based on math and logic. And so for me, that what we endeavor to do is put the wrestler in the best body position mathematically, physics based sound, and then try every piece of technique against that body position and vice versa. And then drill those pieces of technique that most effectively negate the effectiveness of people who have the best body position and the best use of physics and math in their wrestling. So sort of a consumer reports test how they do for cars, let's hit the wall at 80 miles an hour and see if the airbags come up. We're sort of the same way. Let's get in this body position and let's get these nationally ranked kids or these NCAA All Americans in this room and let's bang, bang, bang and see what evolves
Right.
and what it reveals. And then let's drill those things that consistently are the most effective against the very best body types, as opposed to trying to drag along pieces of technique that maybe haven't evolved organically into what wrestling is currently, because it is an organic sport. Combat sports is organic. It's always changing.
That's very true. And I have to say, I'm curious. How did you how did you first see that? How did you first see that? Some of the techniques that we're using in wrestling today, they're not necessarily evolving in an effective way.
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. So initially, my youngest child wanted to be in a club team at 6 years old. I took him over to Stanford. At that time, they had evolved with a new head coach. They had a new club program. The club coach was really outstanding, and he let me participate. Mostly, I helped with the parents and other things, but over time, I would begin to watch the wrestlers. I would watch him coach, and he was an Olympic training center athlete. And I would watch great wrestlers like Jason Welch, three-time NCAA All-American, four-time California finalist, three-time California champ, Hodge Trophy winner, junior Hodge Trophy winner. And I would say to Jason, "Hey, Jason, why aren't you doing it the way the coach is?" And he'd say, "Well, I am." But in my memory, could see that he wasn't. And I realized they weren't using their muscles in the correct order to do that. So initially, what I tried to do was just help them do what they were already doing better. So if the coach contracted certain muscles, it had certain, like a 90-degree angle here or 180-degree angle there. I tried to get them to replicate that and then started to teach them movements that would replicate that, but wasn't assigned a specific technique to keep the interfering parent out of the way. That's the
Okay.
truth. And so then over time of doing that, and then I started to travel. So Jason said to me, Nico Trigas, I would go to Fargo. I went with Jason to these tournaments around the country, and I would come back to California, and I would go, oh, what they're doing here is not going to work against somebody in at this tournament at Walsh Jesuit Ironman. It's not going to work against somebody who gets Super 32 because they're making these physics based shapes with their bodies, and this cannot fight that.
Right.
So then I just eventually stopped trying to uh, not ask permission or really be accepted. Just I just finally, this one coach said, Carolyn, what are they going to do? Nobody can fire you, right? You don't work for a school,
Mm.
and thousands of kids come to you. Do what you want,
Yeah.
and that's. So then I started going, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I literally I just had dinner with my brother this week and yesterday in Lexington. There's nothing in my background that has anything to do with wrestling. My high school sweetheart was a good wrestler, and sometimes people are like, well, that's how you knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I even had someone say to me, my former husband's last name is Sheets with a Z, and I went to a tournament. And my son was young. This is in California, and this guy said, "Oh, we figured out how you know about wrestling. You used to be married to Mike Sheets, but we heard you had a pleasant divorce." I'm like, my son's last name is with a Z, not an S, and
Uh-huh.
I've never met that person in my life. People don't want to believe that I just see it, but
Mm-hmm.
I actually do.
Yeah, as you're describing that, you know, you're watching kids and you're noticing that certain things aren't going to work for other wrestlers. You know, they're wrestling at Super 32 or the Walsh. Um, how how do what are you seeing? What, like, describe what it is that you actually see, because you're not seeing, a single leg like we would see it, or a
No.
double leg.
No, so when somebody's trying to move forward, whether in fighting or in wrestling, so in fighting they're transitioning from one of maybe 20 disciplines that they're good at to wrestling or to striking, and in wrestling they're moving forward to penetrate. What I found is often when they're looking at their opponent or the structure of the opponent, they're not physically placing their body in a position that keeps that structure from moving left or right, forward or back. So if it was just a building and we were going to knock it down, you've seen it. They go through the bottom and then it collapses down. So when someone takes a penetration step, oftentimes they're on a flat back foot. So the trajectory of their lead leg cannot go far enough into the structure to keep and move it left or right. I used to say, why are people putting their knees down prior to touching the person and then grabbing? Why don't you put your foot between the legs, because then it can't go left or right. Just like when you were little, you did the bike tire.
Mm-hmm.
You put your bike upside down and you do the wheels and you stick straws through it.
Right, right.
Oh, I'm older, so that's what
Oh,
we
I
did for
remember that.
fun. Right? We
Yeah.
did for fun. Why would you not penetration step that way? Why would you not go all the way? And then I would see people lean over and they would reach.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so they're off balance. They can be snapped. You got to take your ankle with your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as far as your wrist can go, your ankle needs to go when you're taking a penetration step,
Mm-hmm.
and your back leg needs to be at a 90-degree angle in that moment of the level change to go. I mean, you could be flat footed,
Mm-hmm.
but if you bend over and reach, only if the other person has inferior body positioning
Uh-huh.
is that going to work. But it won't work on somebody with good body positioning, and you won't be able to strike or take someone down in fighting also.
Okay.
So that's literally what I see, and I have no preconceived notion. So I didn't learn to wrestle by pieces of technique that were taught to me, like sprawl or circle, snap, circle. I'm like, why would you snap, circle? Right? I mean, like if that was my job, I'd be fired. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the long way home.
Mm-hmm.
Straight line beats a circle. Right? All these things that I just know to be true.
Mm-hmm.
From so when I see it, I never tried to make myself learn the technique. I wanted to be initially ancillary. I wanted to help because I saw all these kids and college guys um, who were working so hard. And then I saw how underfunded wrestling was at the high school and at the NCAA level, at these college coaches, except for a few programs. And they're maxed out. So I thought, if I can understand things that they don't understand and help them apply it to it and put my time and effort into people who really want it, then I'm going to help these kids go to college, or I'm going to help these other people be successful. And I think wrestling, because you can't stall, because there's no genetic predisposition, that it's paramount to having a better society, better people.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of wrestlers, if not the majority, who, you know, maybe they tried out for the basketball team, but got to a point where they realized, hey,
Correct. Or football. That football is the big one.
uh-huh,
They're
exactly.
not the right body type, right size.
Exactly. It's very body type dependent. And, you talk about different body types,
Yes,
and
sir.
wrestling is it's so different. Your sort of bag of moves, or your tactics, or your strategy. It's all based on what your body is, what your body type is. So I'm very interested to hear, when you have, say, uh, a kid who's tall and lanky versus a kid who's short and stocky.
Hmm.
Are you are you coaching them to their particular body
Yes,
type.
always. So when we're, even if they're all in the same practice, we'll get to a certain piece or a certain part of the movement. I'm like, okay, all of you all that have short bodies and long legs, this is how you're going to do this. If you have long bodies and short legs, this is how you're going to do this. So let's take the Manville brothers, Carson and Pearson, the youngest two, not Mason at Penn State. I've never really coached Mason. He's been to AKA and I've worked with him during his redshirt Olympic year, but I'm not coached him like I have Carson and Pearson. Carson has a super long body and short legs. Pearson has very long legs and a short body. Their dad is their main coach. I'm the ancillary coach. David is big on 2-on-1s and Russian ties. So when Carson grabs, his weight's lower. When he puts his body in, there's a longer line from his shoulder to his hip, and he's got a natural defense against somebody when he's in on the 2-on-1. Pearson has got long legs. He's got to be closer. His center of gravity's way high compared to Carson, and he gets pulled differently. So the way I would suggest that Pearson turns his outside lead leg and first Carson is very different because we're talking about two different places of center of gravity. And if you're going to 2-on-1 or rush or tie someone, you have to be able to torque from your hip correctly. And if you're taller or shorter, it makes a big difference.
Wow.
So I see that instantly. So when these kids come in, or in fighters come and wrestle with me, or I go, Javier Mendez somebody will be striking. I'll be in the, I'll be sitting on the side of the boxing ring watching, and Javi lets me participate in that because I see things that other people don't. And so I'm really helpful in that manner. There's a young man, Toma Fisher from Del Barton, who got fifth at Cadet Worlds. He's a Swiss citizen, and he calls it the in-betweens. So I'm really helpful with the in-betweens, transitions, and things. So when I watch, I'm just trying to when I see something or I coach, I'm trying to put them in the best position to do what they want to do in the moment.
Absolutely. I have to say that some of when you hear about how you describe some of the things, it's hard to understand
Yes,
at times because I don't think most wrestlers are used to
correct,
hearing instructions in that form.
correct.
I was on the mat with you earlier today, right? And you grabbed a 113 pounder, and you're talking about Khabib and how he's able to generate so much pressure through his hips, right, when he's on top of somebody. And that's something, I got to say, I think that that hip pressure. So I think a lot of people are familiar. You watch Khabib fight, he takes somebody down, immediately the person on the ground, they're locked into the position, and it's because of his hip pressure,
Hips over knees.
right? And
And he has a 90-degree angle between his quad and his calf always.
right. So 90-degree angle. When you hear that, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Right. And I'm trying to put two and two together, but then I felt it, right? I weigh 200 pounds. You brought a 113-pound kid to do the 90 degrees, hips over knees on me. I couldn't move. I was locked in. I mean, I weigh over 70, I weigh almost 80 pounds more than this kid.
And he's in seventh grade.
Oh, wow. Even better. So describe to me this 90-degree concept, and how does Khabib use that when he's taking guys down?
Well, you'll see that Daniel Cormier does it also, but I don't think it was. I think for watching Daniel or being in a practice room with Daniel when he's training is it's almost the same. The same is true of Luke Rockhold. They are so mathematically sound by nature in what they do with their athleticism, which usually isn't the case. But they're so mathematically sound. It's like for me with my pattern driven brain, it's like poetry or an orchestra. I mean, it's beautiful. And so when you have a 90-degree angle, if we were building this building or even this table, if everything, all the angles were 110 to 10, this table would be on the floor. So a 90-degree angle is the strongest angle of all.
Right.
And it's what's used for all bases of all building. So having a series of 90-degree angles and asking your muscles to work from that position enables you to move across the ground with a trajectory that's parallel to the mat. or with the strongest. So even when Khabib is choking someone out at the end, when he chokes, he's trying to decide whether to bar or get Gaethje to tap, his hips are still over his knees. If you watch the fight with McGregor, his hips are still over his knees, even though it might be inverted. He may be like here, but his hips are still at 90 degrees. There's a 90-degree angle between his quad and his torso, and a 90-degree angle between the back of his hamstring and his calf.
Wow.
And you'll see that Daniel does that too naturally. Luke Rockhold does that naturally. But some people don't, and then that would be something that I would show. Or even if, say, I remember a very famous wrestler, Ed Ruth, was at AKA, and we were pummeling. And Daniel was training, and there was a lot of people in the room. Aaron Pico was there that day, and Bunch was with Ed. And Daniel looked at me like, go help Ed. And I said, Ed, I'm Carolyn. The first time I met him, I'm Carolyn. Are you fighting or wrestling next? Because when you pummel for wrestling, it's low. When you pummel for fighting, it has to be high. And he said, I'm fighting next. I said, okay, well, do you mind? I said, can you shoulder in on me? But he doesn't know me, so he doesn't realize I'm strong. So he didn't really want to do it. And so I inverted on him. I said, if you pummel here, I'm going to go like this with my arm at 90 degrees. And I hit him, and his head went back. He's like, I totally get it. Mm-hmm. Right. But if I tried to hit him without a 90 degrees here, mm-hmm. there's no strength. Gotcha. There's no power. So, wow. Anytime we put our arms up, people don't like to hand fight with me, and they think, I don't know what they think it is, but it's really a series of 90-degree angles. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, a 200-pound fighter is going to overwhelm me eventually, but I'm going to be in there for a minute, right? Because I have a series of 90-degree angles.
And so hand fighting with those 90-degree angles, are you talking about striking in certain positions out of those, or just?
So like if I'm underhooked, if somebody underhooks me, I'm going to come up and make a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to put my forearm in here mm-hmm. in 90 degrees, and the pressure that causes on the person is so strong because I have a 90-degree angle here. Also, I have a 90-degree angle between my tricep and my torso, mm-hmm. so it's very, even though it's here, it's very strong. Wow. So if I did it to you, you would go, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We'll have to go through that again. And I noticed.
Even when I put my arm in on you there, mm-hmm. I had a 90-degree angle between I was elbow deep at a 90-degree angle, and I kept that 90 degrees, but it was just inverted when I used my tricep.
Right. Yeah. So it's like a series of, whether it's your hips and your knees or whether you're working with your arms, it's just 90 degrees.
So if we took that same little boy, Chris, and put him down and made a series of 90-degree angles in ref's position, and you tried to push him over on his hips or pull him, or you wouldn't be able to move him. Wow. And so for an average wrestler, if you run out on a mat, just an average kid, just an 8-year-old who really wants to be accepted and do it, and you can get them to tighten their calves, pull up their quads, pull their transverse ab back, hit their hamstrings, pull their sternum to their chin. Mm-hmm. And when the other person goes to snap them, they're not going to be able to. The average kid cannot snap somebody in that position. Mm-hmm. So then it's like it gets so much hope, because up till then, kids are told do this, do that. Then they go to a match and they lose, and the parents are screaming, and it's just, they parents will say to me, my kid doesn't want it. I'm like, they're out there in a leotard, basically. Are they asking to wear that to the mall or to a birthday party? Of course they want it, right? That's not it. That's not it. We have to figure out how to teach wrestling better. And so, like you said before, you didn't understand verbally what I was saying. The kids that come and stay, they come to camp for 2 or 3 weeks, they remember it forever. And you call Josh Saunders or Jesse Vasquez, they're both wrestling today in Nebraska. They'd be like, oh yeah, straight wrist pull. Oh, they would remember exactly to this day. And then they learn to apply that same logic and whatever else technique, like Jesse's gets to learn from Zeke Jones, or Josh is learning from Mike Gray and Cole, then they apply that same logic and the use of the muscle in that order, and they become better quicker. And it's exciting because we need them to have hope, and it needs to be effective, and they need to be able to overcome the things to keep them from not wrestling, because wrestling is very important.
Oh, absolutely.
Wrestling is very important.
Absolutely. And you talk about, the things that you spend time on, teaching a little kid, things that can be motivational to them.
Correct.
Right? Because they're going to see results very quickly. And I've always, heard coaches talk about high percentage moves, right? Mm. Practice your double legs, practice your single legs, practice your front headlocks. But this is something, you you get a kid to understand this 90-degree concept, and it's going to immediately help them across the board, whether they're on their feet, whether they're on top, whether they're on, I imagine bottom. That's one
Yeah, the
technique I
bottom
didn't
is
see, but
yeah, bottom is my favorite.
okay. All right. I'll have to ask you about that when we go back out. Can we talk about, MMA a little
Yes,
bit?
absolutely. Love MMA.
Okay, so this is kind of a half wrestling, half MMA question. So last night, JB Jordan Burroughs
Yes.
wrestled against Zahid Valencia.
Yes.
Burroughs wins 8-5.
Yes.
I think it was a lot more competitive than some people thought it would be. I was talking to Josh a couple days ago, and he was saying, "Oh, I think this is a setup match. JB's just going to go out there and smoke him."
Hmm.
Granted, JB was going up in weight. They wrestled at a catch weight, but Zahid, he came out I think with a 4-0 lead, and JB eventually comes back to win it. Um, Afterwards, Burroughs says Zahid was controlling the pace early in the match. He was bringing the heat. He was running me straight to the edge. It's very difficult to get prepared for that type of length. So when you hear that,
Mm.
when you hear JB talk about Zahid's length, how does that translate into your concept of patterns and geometry?
Sure. So there's when you talk about somebody who's very long, and I am extremely fond of Zaid. I've known him since he was a little boy, him and Anthony. And while I'm not their coach in any way, I do feel very strongly about them as people, and I adore them. So Zaid is, I think Zaid, from my perspective, when I was watching, I for some reason I felt Zaid. I don't know if I'd say I felt he lost some steam or I don't know what it was, but I felt as if he was in optimal shape, the best shape I've ever seen him in. Then that could have been a little bit of a different match because I think they got to a point where Burroughs realized where Zaid was, and he went, his caution went out the door, and he just went after him. But when you wrestle somebody with length, it's extremely important that when you get a hold of them, that you hold their weight bearing side still. So if you shoot on somebody, and say I shoot on somebody with Zaid's length, and my right arm is around his left leg and my left hand is around his right, but I feel the majority of his weight on my right side, his left side, it's imperative that I take that hand, pull that wrist straight, and get that elbow to the ground and pull him just slightly onto his weight bearing side. So then I have an opportunity. Now I'm controlling 90%, 90 degrees of his circumference, his 360-degree circumference. And that gives me 270 degrees to come out.
Huh.
So we were doing it earlier before you got here today when I was teaching the kids how to move their leg the way I did to put it in. So Chris, he would hold down the side and then he would pivot around 270 degrees and come out right to the takedown and even to the cradle. So when you have somebody of length, you have to hold one side down or push them onto their predominant where their weight is because that naturally pulls you over. I mean, nobody is symmetrical. So if you can help hold them, help pull them, underhook them, drag their elbow down, whatever it is to their weight bearing side, that gives you more space to come out. A lot of people want to come out and make a big circle because when you're young, they are always talking about your legs, keep people away from your legs. So they want the kids to get shot on so they don't quit. So much of wrestling is taught at the early age based on trying to keep the kid to quit as opposed to setting them up for success for their whole career. And it just has to be
Hmm.
some combination. We definitely don't want them to quit, right? So we want to make those early tournament experiences successful. But we also have to have another lane they're traveling that affects them for their long term. So when you have somebody in length, you got the side down, then you want to go parallel to their body and come back on a straight line, not circle, because if I hold his weight bearing side down, like say I'm holding Zaid's left leg down with my right hand, his right leg is here, I come out in a circle, well, he's going to be able to post that right leg and start to drag weight. But if I step parallel to him and then reverse on a straight line back, I'm immediately going to be around him for two. His weight's already going to be going to that side. I can straight wrist pull my elbow, and then they're more likely to come over. Same is true in fighting.
Hmm.
So a lot of people grab, but then when they go to do something, they don't pull. They don't pull that weight bearing side. Even when they're on the cage, someone will have their arm in. My opponent's against the cage. They're a tall person, and they just put their hand around their back like they're going to buddy, hi buddy, instead of pulling down their weight bearing side and making them vulnerable against the cage for the strike. I don't know. That's a long answer,
No,
but
that is
hopefully,
great. I wish you
hopefully
were
that makes
around.
sense.
I wish you were around about 20 years ago. I could have used some of that advice.
I was around. I just wasn't coaching then.
All right. So, hypothetical question.
Mhm.
All right. So you're one of the wrestling coaches at AKA.
Yes.
Let's say Zahid and JB both walk to your door.
Mhm.
All right. Now you've got Zahid, so this makes it a little bit tougher. But let's pretend you don't. They both come to you. They want to be UFC champs. You've got to pick one of them. Okay. You got to pick one of them solely on whether or not you think one of them will become a UFC champ.
Oh, Zahid. For sure. And I think predominantly because Saeed's length of his body and his torso to have to teach somebody how to kickbox at a later day in life. So his ability to, with a short body and a long leg, his ability to reach out and kick, as opposed to JB's got a little bit shorter legs, a little bit longer body. For them to kick effectively past their whole body length is harder. And you can see it, a little bit with Duran Wynn and some of those guys that have that same type of body type. Doesn't mean they're not great fighters. They are great fighters. I'm in no way diminishing any of them, but that is an advantage. That length that he has to be able to do that is really advantageous.
Absolutely. And you think about boxers back in the day, Mike Tyson, obviously, even if he wasn't, even if he wasn't a world champ, he probably would have been one of the shortest heavyweight fighters ever. But yet he had all this success. And people ask me about that sometime. I have a feeling it has something to do with a square ring in boxing versus in MMA, you got almost a circle, an octagon. I think that gives a lot of advantages to the tall fighters.
And it's funny too because I think back to the Mayweather McGregor, boxing match, and when people were Mayweather let that go a lot longer than he needed to, right? So we were watching it, and there were some wrestlers with me. I said, "Watch, as soon as he's ready, he's going to step here and do this." Every time he lets him out, but he's letting him escape on purpose. And the round ring is really helpful. But if you're somebody is a good stalker, so to me, when I think of Aaron Pico as a 8th grade, 9th grade wrestler, because I met him the same time I met Zaid and Anthony. They were all at St. John Bosco together, and I adore Aaron also and his entire family. And but Aaron was just like this stalker. He just stalked, and by the time the person would, ta-dun, 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 try to catch their breath, circle, Aaron would be right here. Like he'd be right on you, but you didn't even see that, he was coming.
Mm-hmm.
So guys that have longer bodies and shorter legs are often better cross the room stalkers than people with long legs, short bodies. Long legs, short body people normally don't muscle up behind their hamstring above their knees unless they're really thinking about it, because they do a lot of flat-footed bending over, level changing when they're a youth, because nobody tells them you need to change levels to build that muscle to have trajectory to shoot. So when I look at a fighter or I look at a wrestler, I'll often say to the person I'm cornering or coaching, I don't think they're going to have a strong penetration step because their trail leg isn't muscled as if they've been repetitively shooting parallel to the mat. But Khabib shoots parallel to the mat. And there's a video that the UFC did of me before the McGregor fight where I'm discussing his wrestling and I talk about his trajectory parallel to the mat. And the UFC media people who are just outstanding, Juan Cardenas and Chris Villa, they found all this video and they're like, "You're exactly right, Carolyn. Look, he's parallel to the mat. He's parallel to the mat when he shoots. He's parallel to the mat." I said, "Yes."
Wow. So, all right. So, Khabib.
Yes.
Continuing with that. So, there have been some rumblings whether or
Yes.
not Khabib is going to fight
Yes.
GSP. I don't know if there's any updates around that. Have you heard?
Well, yesterday I literally texted with Javier Mendez, who's still in Uzbekistan, staying with Habib currently, and I asked him, sort of for planning reasons for me, if we thought Habib was going to be back in the country, with COVID, desist, would he be back in the country anytime soon? And would it, would there be a camp? Because I try to do my other things around being at AKA for the fighters training camps. And he said, Carolyn, he goes, I have not discussed it with him. He said it's completely between him and his mother, and he has not brought it up to me or asked my opinion if he should fight again. So since Javier Mendez has been his main coach since he came to the UFC and in the US, I would think if Javi had not heard about it, and Javi would tell me, then it's probably not a topic that's on the forefront because they're literally spending every day together camping out in the wilds of Uzbekistan, and they've been in Dubai together, and they're literally together every day. And he's been with them since September 1 over there. Javi hasn't been back to the United States, so I suspect that it's not a topic that's at hand. But when it is, I'm sure I'll hear. But Javier Mendez, one of the things I admire about him is that his self-image isn't based on how his fighters do.
Mm-hmm.
It's what he feels about himself as a person. So
Yeah.
it does not surprise me. And I would be, just today, we were in this room, this clinic you're here, and someone was asking one of the kids from high school about a kid who had transferred out. And he's like, well, why did he transfer out? What was he unhappy with? And I said to the dad, you need to ask that kid's parent. You're asking a 16-year-old boy who goes to that school what should only be discussed between adults. And I'm sure the man didn't mean it. He just saw something on a forum and wanted to ask. But Javier Mendez is the same way, and I try to be the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be why they respect me. The fighters respect me. So I try to stay out of that. I only ask. Sometimes I'll ask Daniel a question,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll say, "Why do you want to know?" And then he goes, "Oh, you just want to know. Like you're just trying to play it." He knows I'm not interested in. Like I'm not trying to be in the know.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know so I can play it, but
Yeah.
not because I care or want to post it or anything. So I would say probably not. And I also don't think GSP is looking for another fight. And if he was, it probably would not be Habib. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have I don't think he has a money need. And I think if he did it again, it would be for, with someone that he would, who may not have, I mean, people always ask me about Ronda Rousey. And I'm like, oh, I love Ronda Rousey. They said, well, why do you think? I said, she started at a time and went to a time and fighting, and things change organically. And sometimes you can't change again organically. I mean, I don't know. She married, or her husband has 3 small kids. They live out near them now. Who knows? Maybe at a certain age, like the allure, whatever forced her to want to get punched in the face is gone. I mean, I don't know, but I know organically it's hard to change and change and change and change and change. I mean, you can sort of change, but it's hard. You have to
Mm-hmm.
sort of shift with the times. And I think GSP would have to change so much
Mm-hmm.
to fight a Khabib person that it's a lot to ask for somebody for a one-time payout
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
when you're okay. A lot of people will stop me or talk to me about fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and they feel really comfortable saying to me, "Oh, I think Cormier should do this, or I think Rockhold should do this, or Josh Thompson, or Crutchmer, or whoever." And I want to say to them, "Why are you saying that?" I mean, I'm with them a lot. I mean, I probably know, but then I realize it's a fan based sport, right? And we need the fans. So I just stay quiet and let people have their opinions. So I don't know. Maybe GSP and Khabib have smoke signals across the world, and they're really doing this. And I mean, I would never know, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I have no indicator that that's true.
GSP and Khabib both. All right. If let's say both stay retired,
Mm.
that's something you don't see very often. Are fighters who retire at the quote unquote right time. Right. There's a lot of guys that stick around, and people always say, they should just retire. And it seems like with the way Khabib fought that last fight against a fighter in Justin Gaethje.
Oh, who's just
Yeah.
incredible.
Oh my God. Yeah. He was one of those guys who just seemed like he's a real fighter. He's a natural fighter. Um, but Khabib just went in there and he did his business. It looked pretty one sided. It looked like a really you know a really good way to go out. And GSP went out slightly differently. Kind of left, came back, left, came back. Um, but if hypothetically they did fight, When you look at GSP and when you look at Khabib from a geometry standpoint, what are you seeing as how that would
Yeah,
play
it
out?
would be so horrible for GSP because he has got a short body and long legs, and he has sort of that hip turnout that you see in a lot of mixed martial artists who are very good at on the ground grappling. And Khabib is so comfortable having his hips close to you. So when his hips are close to him and you've got a short body, he's got a long body, and he's leaning, then you have to sort of step back or move from your knees, and he's just gonna
Huh?
freestyle sweep you
Huh?
like he did at what's his name, Barbosa. He's going to freestyle sweep you, and it's just hard to deal with his. It's hard to deal with his pressure. And when you look at Khabib in his fight shorts, you notice that his legs, that his calves, he looks like a British soccer player to me with big, thick quads, back muscle, and like these super thick calves. And Khabib's got these super thick calves, and his the way he can hold his body up, he's so strong there. He's not, he's not diminished in the legs. A lot of great fighters and a lot of jujitsu guys often have big upper torsos, but their legs are not filled out. And Khabib is just so much pressure in your face. But I have to say that I think a lot of Khabib's success from observing him since 2012 would be that he doesn't have any room in his brain for anything except what matters to him: friends, family, working out, religion. I'm not saying them in the right order. And
Hmm.
he is loyal to everyone by being loyal to the things he cares about. And everything else is not conceivable to him.
Hmm.
It's not conceivable to him. So the average person who grows up in a different world, in a different culture than he did, has a lot going on in their mind. But I think in his mind, it's not like he's super smart. That's not what I'm saying. But he's always focused on this. This is what's important. This is what's. I remember him coming to AKA, and he had on a cream colored collared shirt. Maybe it was a J.C. Penney. I think it had a Fox. He had gotten it from Ross or some place like that. Worked out, went in the bathroom, cleaned it off, washed it out, dried it, put it back on in the hand dryer, and he that was him. He all he was focused on was fighting, getting the right food, getting those things. And there's, I don't know if you saw the submission radio, Javier Mendez talking about when Khabib lived in my home with my son, and all the fighters, all the Russians lived with me. So I have some experience with them, just observing them on the day to day, not just in the practice room. And I've actually been in the corner with Khabib when he and I and Javier Mendez have cornered other people. So I know them. I've been in the I've been in the locker room, the warm up room with Khabib, Islam, Zabari, all of us there together, Manop, and so I've observed them for a long time in ways that other people just don't have the opportunity to, and their brain is just not cluttered. They have no, it's everything is literal to him. Like everything is, coach, why McGregor can call my wife, what McGregor said, but an American CEO get fired for calling someone a homosexual. It's like it's literal to him. Why is that okay? Why is why is the world why is this even being allowed? It does not compute.
Hmm.
He's not thinking about what he's going to wear. He's not thinking about shirts. He's not thinking about anything else. But that, I mean, he has all those things now. I saw some video of Daniel teasing him in Abu Dhabi about his comfortable, his comfortable, expensive shoes, not ones we got over at Ross, or there's this little Fuki place we eat next to AKA sometimes, which is really just salt and water, but it's so inexpensive, and that's where they go. He has all that stuff now, I suspect, but
Well,
it has no effect on him.
yeah, he seems like one of those guys that what you see is what you get. You know.
It's he doesn't have that. He's has no guile. He's not coy. He
Yeah.
has no understanding of any of that. It's not, you watch him, you're like, oh yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. That is pretty remarkable because fighting is such a mental sport, and there are a lot of guys out there who's got to talk themselves kind of into some story. I'm this or I'm that. right before they get into the ring. You even heard Mike Tyson. Everybody knows about this. He walks to the cage or walks to the ring. When he starts, he's nervous. By the time he gets there, he's transformed into, this big bad guy. Khabib's different. He seems like he's just always like that.
Always like that. I will say two things. One, I had dinner one time with Javier Mendez, Bob Cook, Scott Coker owns Bellator, and Herschel Walker. I think his wife. I'm not sure, but they're a longtime person. And it was funny because they were talking about how Herschel Walker, when he was at AK, this was before I was there, that he's like this very kind, gentle, never cusses. But once he got back in the back before the fight, he's like, you, Emin, like it was so funny because he's so nice. He's so nice. But I think one of the biggest accelerants for Habib's career at AKA, like a natural uplift for him, was the innate and unrecognized intellectual capacity of Daniel Cormier. Daniel is has an emotional IQ and a genuineness that is rarely paralleled. And I grew up in a political family. We moved to Washington, D.C. for my parents' political career. I mean, I've been around a lot of very astute people, emotionally savvy people who can get people to do things. Daniel is his intellect is so high, and his genuine interest in meeting people at their emotional needs, I think, helped him on the come up, like through everything that happened, because Daniel would engage with them, and Daniel just like kept pulling him up as a person. I saw that, felt that around them. That's typical of AKA in general, but and then Javier Mendez, his focus is how to be a better person. He wants to feel comfortable with himself and how he treats other, not whether he's recognized for really who he is. I mean, what he's accomplished. So
Absolutely.
I just want to make sure I say that about Daniel because, I hold him and, he I consider him my peer and I hold him in very high esteem. And I
Yeah.
want to make sure.
You notice, so, we're here right now in Cincinnati on the other side of the country. I've personally never been to AKA, but you see the videos, right? And this is with a lot of famous gyms, right? You kind of get a sense of what the vibe is like there, but you're still on the outside. And AKA is one of those places where it seems like there's a lot of camaraderie.
Yes.
But I want to ask you this. This is my last question for you. There are a lot of wrestlers there, a lot of high level wrestlers.
Yes, for
right?
sure.
You've got Khabib.
Right.
You've got Daniel Cormier. You've got was Josh Thompson a wrestler?
Yes.
Yeah,
Josh wrestled at, I want to say, Northern Idaho.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So Josh Thompson, I think
John
Bunch,
Fitch.
John Fitch. Yeah.
From Purdue.
Uh-huh.
And then he had a buddy. Gosh, why can't I think of his name? He's such a great guy. Who also wrestled at Purdue. Mm-hmm. Bunch from Edinburgh. Uh-huh. Deron Wynn. Kyle Crutchmer. Now we have Nick Piccinini. Ed Ruth. Jersey James, who went to Penn State also. I mean, we have a lot of, I'm sure I'm leaving people out, so forgive me, but I mean, we have a lot of fighters, wrestlers that come there.
What is it about AKA that is attracting all these wrestlers?
Well, I think when you come to AKA and you're a good wrestler, then you're going to be able to continue wrestling at a high level, which is going to be your predominant go-to. Like I'm describing in body types, for a lot of those good wrestlers, long body, short legs, doesn't always translate to fighting as easy. So then when you're with a group of people that, I think when you've been a good wrestler, this is my observation, and keep in mind I didn't wrestle, but I think when you're a good wrestler and you're a certain age, 21, 22 to 24, you're weaning off the day-to-day interaction you get from people around your success to doing this on your own, to maturating to someone who may or may not have a kid one day, etc. So that's like a big balance. It's at a little bit higher level. So when you go there and you're a great wrestler, but you have to be vulnerable as a striker, you have to be vulnerable as an BJJ, you have to be vulnerable in kickboxing, you have to become vulnerable. It's often easier to do in a place where what you're good at is already respected and that you feel that comfort. Because I do think a lot of people are coached, and I'm sure people disagree with this, but I do think a lot of people spend a lot of time doing well in wrestling out of fear. fear of not being approved of by their parent or coach or someone, their peers. So when you get to fighting, that's out the door, right? You have to do it for yourself because you're going to get jacked in the jaw. I mean, I get banged around all the time and stuff, and people are like, did your nose just break? Yeah, I think maybe it did. Right? It's swollen up, and like, "Oh, I'm not going to touch it because I know better than to blow it. But I think that they it's a safe place to be vulnerable. And you can go through AKA and get to different places. And if you're not self-motivated, no one's going to hold you by the hand there. And I think that also is makes you a better fighter quicker. I think a lot of places you go and people are like, you're my man, you're always going to be my gal, you're my man, you're my gal. We're going to, because I coach Jermaine Durand and some really great women fighters too. And like, you're going to be this, but really that's not going to carry you through. And you get punched in the face or your parents are upset that your arm was broken or your spouse wants to leave because it does take a certain type of narcissism to be successful at these things in time.
Mhm.
So I think AKA allows you to do all those things. And we have very great periphery people, Crazy Bob Cook, the Zinkin management, Ali, Rizvan, and those Khabibs. Everybody's around. We have some great striking coaches, Hector, and all these other guys that come in, Leandro, Ron Kessler. I mean, these are all people who are professionals who want to make the rest of their coaching career there, and they're all there to help. And there's no room for ego at AKA. It would never fly. You would self-select out because the pressure would be too great. Nobody would want to work with you.
Carolyn Wester, everybody.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
very
me.
much. So, Carolyn, if folks want to find you, how can they get
In touch
in
with
touch
me.
with you?
Yeah, we have a website, wrestlingprep.com. I've currently am not putting camps and events we're doing on there because we've been harassed a little bit in some states we've gone to by people who don't like the numbers we garner. But you can reach me anytime on my cell, which is 650-245-3533, at Wrestling Prep at Instagram, Wrestling Prep on Facebook, and then www.wrestlingprep.com.
Awesome.
Anytime.
You've got to write a book someday.
Oh, I don't know. I don't. There's a documentary being done about me right now, so we'll see how that goes.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So
Carolyn, thank you very
you're
much.
welcome. Thank you.